Hey, it's Millie, and welcome to the Generalist World podcast. This is a show where I interview people from the Generalist World community, and we talk things like the future of work, careers, predictions, their hot takes, and really understand what their squealy careers have looked like. So if you're a generalist who feels like they're living in a specialized world, this is the podcast for you. Hello, and welcome to the podcast, Jonathan. It is so exciting to have you here. How are you going today?
Yeah, going well, thank you. I'm living the dream here in West London. Fortunately, the weather is not living the dream with me, but I'm very much looking forward to going to sunnier climes next week. I'm off to Marrakesh for a few days, so looking forward to that.
Amazing. My husband has this great saying that he definitely stole from someone else. That is, there is no such thing as bad weather, just the wrong clothing.
Yes, and yeah, I don't have many rain max, let's put it that way.
Well, Jonathan, it's amazing to have you here. You are a super active, wonderful GW member. We actually just crossed paths a week or so ago in London at a bar right before you were going home to your cottage pie. Or your shepherd's pie. We had a debate around this. Was it a shepherd's pie?
It was a cottage pie and there were tomatoes in it and mushrooms, but there was meat in it as well. I don't know if is that a no-no for you? I can't remember. Are you a veggie?
I was for many years. For 8 years, I was a vegetarian, and then I moved to this island, and I couldn't think of a good reason not to eat the local venison. Like, they're just
Mm.
cruising around on the hill. There's actually far too many of them. Basically, I got into a massive moral debate with myself, and that was my gateway back into eating meat.
Nice. I just couldn't imagine a life without meat, but that's just me. But I'm trying to eat less meat, actually. I am trying to eat less meat. So we perhaps have one meal a week where there's no meat. My wife Louise is doubling down on legumes, which is interesting from a flatulence perspective sometimes. Don't know if you want to include that in the podcast, but we're getting through it.
Shout out, Louise. If you're listening to this, I'm sure you're delighted that that was just said. Jonathan.
That was more my flatulence, not hers.
So let's give people a bit of a flavor of what they can expect from the next 30 minutes or so that they're going to be spending with us. Can you tell us a little bit more about who you are, maybe what you do, and why someone might be excited to spend the next 30 or so minutes with us?
Wow. Okay. So I've worked in business for like 25, 30 years. Some perhaps on the slightly older spectrum of the generous world demographics right now. But I think that people might be interested in listening to the next half hour just to see how a generalist career might pan out in the future decades. I might have a few useful nuggets of advice on how to go about, things like finding a job and things like that, which I've managed to navigate through a few times. And yeah, I think I'm generally very good, very good company.
Plus one. I've hung out with you. You are very good company. So, what do you do? The dreaded question, the dreaded question of for generalists. How do you describe what you do?
Yeah, it is a dreaded question for generalists. And I think the first thing is it depends on who I'm talking to, which immediately creates whole challenges in itself where you think, oh my God, am I a fraud? I've literally been in networking events where if you asked about five people who I spoke to, oh, did you meet that guy Jonathan? They'd all kind of say, yeah, yeah, he's this, or no, no, he's not, he's this. And it's like, oh my God, he's some kind of Walter Mitty type who doesn't know who he is. But I'm pretty confident I know who I am, but I do try and kind of tailor my kind of one line elevator pitch or just who I am, depending on who I'm talking to. And I've kind of made peace with the fact that that can sometimes feel fraudulent, but it's not. It's just me being authentic and trying to connect.
How do you know which one to use? Do you like ask them first and get them to speak so that you know which direction to take it?
Yeah, and one of the reasons why I've now got glasses is so that I can read name badges. Because if you can read name badges, you kind of get an idea of who you're talking to before you talk to them. But yeah, if they don't have a name badge, or if they're just someone that you meet while you're getting a coffee at one of these events or anything, yeah, okay. So the first thing I'd probably keep it quite general and just say, I'm a business leader. I work in B2B. I have done for the last 25 years, and that's kind of the most sort of lowest common denominator in terms of the threads of all the things I've done. I try not to get too specific or deep down a wormhole until they open up a bit about them and where they work, and so I try and build in a question to ask them back quite early on in the conversation, so you don't feel like you're on Mastermind or something and someone's asking you, who are you, who do you work for, where, how long have you been there. It's like it's a conversation. So chuck something in the ring, but ask them something back, and then hopefully that'll lead to a conversation which has some good affinity between the two of you.
Mm. That's fantastic. And when you look back at your, I guess, your career arc, the way that your career has played out, I know it's taken you to places, I want to get this right, like Libya, Honduras, and even the Isle of Wight. How did that happen? How did you end up on those places?
No.
What's the story there?
Well, there's no way, if you asked an 18-year-old Jonathan, where would your career take you, Jonathan? There's no way I would have said the Isle of Wight. But there you go, or Libya or Honduras. Now, I think it was Steve Jobs who said that it's really difficult sometimes to join the dots in your career and make sense of it until your deathbed. Which is a bit morbid, but I see a lot of sense in that, especially for generalists. So just to kind of answer, how did I get to the Isle of Wight? Where and, was because I was asked from someone I used to work with to go in and have a look at a business that was struggling, because he knew I had that kind of skill set and he wanted a trusted pair of eyes to go and kind of find out what was going on that site. And actually, that you pull at that thread. I met him through a previous role. I got that role because I spoke Spanish and Portuguese, so I did modern languages at university, and that was definitely a kind of a required skill set, if you like, for the role that I was doing, which was a sales role in the region of in Central America, which is how I got to Honduras. And then before that, the Libya thing was just really random. So I got this interim gig. Oh, it was when the Olympics were in London, so 2012. I was doing some work for a software company. I'd never worked for software before, but one of my friends at the Schoolgate, actually, he put me in touch with a venture capital guy. One of their portfolios of business was trying to sort of grow their business, and they were looking for someone with international business expertise. And I'd done quite a lot of work abroad through a previous role. And the software guy is based in Richmond, Teddington, in southwest London. But they worked a lot with offshore oil and gas and businesses, and they had this inventory management software. I didn't really know what that was, to be honest with you, at the time. But what their business problem, if you want, was they wanted to enter new markets. And so that one of the inbound opportunities came through, and it was this guy saying, "Oh yeah, I'm in Libya, and Gaddafi, he's gone, and we've got all these all these warehouses for oil and gas kind of widgets and stuff, but we don't know what's there anymore because half of it's been blown up or stolen. So we need some software to help us with this, and can you come and have a look?" That's like Muggins here. And I'm pretty, yeah, I'll take certain risks. I don't think I'm flippant with things, but I'd worked in a security business for 10 years where my boss was kind of ex-army. They did lots of sort of kidnap and ransom advice and stuff. So I felt relatively kind of comfortable understanding risks. And so we had a plan to get into Tripoli and talk to the oil and gas company. I went with my then boss, and yeah, I've got some amazing photos. And it was quite a weird time because it's, as I say, it's about 6-9 months after Gaddafi fell. So the whole country was in a pretty bad state in terms of infrastructure. I remember, landing at the airport. I mean, the most disgusting toilet goes to Tripoli Airport. I'll give it an award. I haven't found a worse one. But then the actual hotel was lovely, and what I remember most was the food. Great fish, it's Mediterranean, and also this massive pita bread that looked like this airship. Where pita breads are really big and they've got lots of air inside. I remember having one of those. It was amazing.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was Libya.
Wow. Okay. A few things I want to pull out for people there. One is the relationships that you form sometimes years before, and you have no idea how they might come back around years later. So there is something to be like really pinned about building these relationships. And the other thing I want to really pin for people is even if you don't have direct experience in doing something, that doesn't mean that you can't do it, because you have all of these other experiences which could be transferable, or you can take bits and pieces and apply what you've learned in one domain to the other. How do those kind of land for you?
100% agree. I think relationships, that they aren't everything, but boy, I mean, if you ask me how have I got work, very few of my jobs have come from applying on LinkedIn. It's usually through relationships, and I don't mean that in a kind of old boy school tie kind of thing. It's much more it's much more fluid than that, and it means different things. It's I think some people get quite negative about the word network, and it doesn't have to be a negative thing at all. And I think, Generalist World's a great example of a network, and you kind of feed into it. So it's not is I think that's one of my big principles. If I was doing a mixtape for my Generalist World podcast, I think one of the songs would be you get what you give from the New Radicals, which you've got to give in, right? You can't just take from a network. It doesn't work. If everyone's just taking, it doesn't work. And I'm always blown away with, the Slack channels you guys have got, and the amount of contributions people make because they're giving. It's not because they expect anything in return right now. But let's be honest, I think you belong to a network. It's, was it Confucius? Everyone does something for a selfish reason, right? You don't just give. Very few people are like that. I'm definitely not one. You do it because at some point you probably want to take out of the network, right? Let's be honest. But that's okay. I think as long as people know that's the expectation, that's why you belong to a network. And
Yeah.
I put the word trust with that. So yes, it's about relationships. And to your point, you don't have to know about inventory management software. That was not, it'd be nice if I knew a little bit more than I knew when I got the job, but that wasn't why they were employing me. You can teach someone the basics on stuff like that, and you're never going to be an expert, especially as a generalist. His expectation of me, the boss, wasn't that I was going to suddenly be a software expert who could explain every single nook and cranny of the software they'd built over the last sort of 5 years. There were people in the business who could do that. That wasn't the problem. It's like, what can you do to contribute? And the fact that I would, you know, get off my arse and go to Libya and ask some questions and triangulate what the opportunity was, which turned out to be a $1 million opportunity, which we closed. So you work out what you can give in that network and you build the trust. I wouldn't have got that opportunity if the guy at the school gates didn't trust me. And the guy at the school gate trusted me for loads of reasons, but then he introduced me to someone in his network. And that's a big principle, I'd say, when you're thinking about LinkedIn and stuff. It's not about your first connections, it's about their connections, really. So
Mm.
when you're thinking, oh my God, I need a job, I'm going to reach out to my LinkedIn connections, it's not, oh, hello, can you give me a job? It's much more about, I wonder who they know in their network who might be useful. And slicing and dicing your network in different ways depending on what you're trying to achieve.
Mm, that's such an important point. And to your point on the network, I think where the immense value comes from Generalist World is that if someone has a problem or a challenge or they're working through something, it's a private network, but they're doing it in a public forum, as everyone in the network can see. So there's not a day that goes by that I don't go through and read like in the Ask for Help channel. And I'm like, okay, I might not be struggling with this right
Completely.
now, but either I might be able to contribute something or I'm just going to learn. I'm like, oh
Yeah.
yeah, what are people working on and how are they working through it? And it's this again, trust, underline, underline, underline. There is no algorithm. You're not trying to gain followers inside a network. You're simply doing it. It's you're gaining reputation. You're gaining trust.
Yeah, and I think that's right. And if you think about how networks and technology have developed in the last 5, 10 years, I'd say that was one of my big kind of, it's not really a prediction, it's happening already, but we're going to see more and more of it. Is these, yeah, if you see LinkedIn, less of a network in itself, it's more a platform, and you can help, promote your own network or your own capabilities on that platform. But it's much more about these sub networks. I don't mean that pejoratively, but these kind of niche networks like Generalist World, where you've got communities of interest who, people who are a lot more trusting of the other people in the network and willing to invest because it's more kind
Hmm.
of, it's a more real size. It's you can get your hands around it still, even though you guys are growing big time. I still feel like I understand what Generalist World is trying to achieve. It's not just a
Hmm.
platform. And there's another one that I'm a part of. And again, I think this is a trend that people aren't just going to belong to one kind of niche network. Yeah, I've got the Generalist World t-shirt, thanks, Millie. But also, I've got other t-shirts, and that's okay. It's like, it's not like, oh my God, I can't believe you're in that network as well. That's where the juice is when you kind of start joining them. One of the other ones I'm part of is called Brave Starts, where their area of interest, if you like, is people kind of 50 plus age category. And there's real issues about people in that category in the workplace, and finding their next role. Ageism is an issue. Sometimes it's not even recognized. And Lucy Standing is doing an amazing job out there with Brave Starts. That's exactly what she's focusing on. So yeah, it's a bit of lobbying at government level, but it's also turning that into a positive thing. People who are like 50 plus, they've got loads of experience, and that can be really helpful. And I think a lot of organizations don't appreciate that.
Yeah. I want to spend a big, juicy chunk of time on this kind of 50 plus. But before we do, I would be amiss if I didn't ask one question from someone who spent 25 years building, fixing, operating businesses. Is there something that stands out time and time and time again as to why a business will fail?
Oh, wow. You know what? I think the easy answer is no, but I would say I think businesses fail all the time. I think it's okay to fail. I think there's so much expectation, and not just from private equity. It's not about the governance or the ownership of businesses. I think there's just so much expectation that everything's going to be perfect all the time. And someone much cleverer than me, I can't remember, was it Napoleon or someone said, a strategy is only as good as you hit the battlefield, and then it's all, you know, that was a
Mm.
paraphrase, but you know what I mean. It's all very well having a perfect strategy, but shit happens. There are lots of environmental factors. I think that's one thing I have learned is that if you're in the right place at the right time with a rising tide, then you can you can kind of make a lot more progress rather than trying to fight the tide,
Mm.
doing something where it's just you've got to understand the bigger macro factors, if you like, in your sector. And that's not just for business, that's for non-profits as well, I'd say. If those environmental trends aren't there, then it's going to be really tough going, however good your business or organization is.
I love that visualization. Often I've heard, the wave and you want to ride the wave, but I actually love the
Yeah.
idea of the rising tide because then it's also like it lifts all the boats.
Yeah, but the opposite
Mm.
of that is that when the tide goes out, and then you find out which have been made well.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Oh, yeah, visual perfection.
Yeah.
Okay, so speaking of businesses, speaking of people who are 50 plus who I completely agree, objectively have so much experience and a different experience, a different perspective than someone who is like just starting in their career. What is your take on how the workforce and how the world of work is going to change maybe over the next 12 months?
Whoa, it's such a big question. I think, yeah, okay, and I don't want to get on a Gen X rant because I don't want to generalize too much. And Gen X has gone through a lot. I feel like the squeeze middle a lot. I've got my kids; they're probably going to finish university and come home and live with me for 10 years, which would be lovely on one level. And then I've got my parents who are kind of getting older, and they're not going to die for even longer now because of various amazing medicines. It is quite a tough time, but every generation's got its challenges, right? I think you've got a lot of, as I say, a lot of talent, a lot of experience in the 50 plus category where for whatever reason, and I think there's some things, as I say, it's not because people are doing it on purpose a lot of the time. It may be if you just look at the demographics of talent managers, then you're more likely to hire people like you, right? That's just a natural human nature that you see in lots of issues with prejudice. And perhaps it's just happening a bit for people who are on the jobs market for whatever reason in that 50 plus category. I think there's a lot of energy and there's a lot of support. I think governments getting their head around the fact that people are living older, they're working older. That's a good thing. That we need to be less reliant on the state pension, right? So let's help people work longer. Yeah, they've got to keep their health, but loads of people, I'm turning 50 next year, but loads of people my age are talking about, yeah, I want to work till my late 60s, 70s. It's because they enjoy work. That's a good thing. I think
Mm.
you will find a lot of people starting their own stuff, feeling confident and going, you know what, corporate life's not for me, and they're not for me, I'm not for them for whatever reason. Let's go off and do my own niche thing. That's been happening for a while, but I think that's going to happen more and more as things like AI help reduce barriers to entry for people to start their own businesses.
Plus one. I completely think we're going to have an explosion of entrepreneurship from necessity because it
Yeah.
it has been sold to us the rules. We were all grew up on this diet of like, pick one job, have the same job, that's security, get your pension, but it's the world is simply changing and I think we're now at this point where it's not even controversial to say. that there is this huge shift toward self-employment, and it doesn't have to be self-employment and going and starting a massive VC-backed business. It can be like, you know, I work with a team of 2 or 3 people. Beautiful. Happy days. That is like my absolute sweet spot of like size and management. So business comes in all different shapes and sizes.
Completely agree. And even government is recognizing that. I think they're starting to walk their talk on stuff like procurement. They don't just want these massive companies to win these government projects. They want to encourage, smaller businesses, organizations to win these lucrative and long-standing contracts year in, year out, because it helps. A lot of the time smaller organizations can move more quickly and be more reactive to what customers actually want. And not all the time. Again, it's easy to move into sort of generalisms. But yeah, again, Gen X is perfectly poised for this. Come on, Gen X, we're out there. Because we if you look at how much change every generation's gone through loads of change. But yeah, I grew up in a house that we didn't even have a TV remote control until I was like 6. Let alone a mobile phone. Forget that. We had at school we had a computer room with these kind of 5 massive metal boxes whirring and a dot matrix printer that just made this kind of sound like we were kind of playing war games or something. It was bizarre, the whole thing. And now look how far we've come. We've had to adapt. My first workplace, I remember we didn't have emails. They just installed it a year after I started, and they had this thing called emails. And there was this computer in a cupboard downstairs that was the server. And go and reset the button. We didn't know what was going on, but just press the button and it'll work again.
Oh, I love that. It reminds me of this. I'm reading a book at the moment called The Order of Time by Oliver Rivoli. I forget the name. It's called The Order of Time. I'm horrible at authors. I'm so sorry, whoever wrote this. And there was this page in it that I was reading it in the evening, and I had to go shout to my husband. And I was like, "Wait, do you realize that this is what happened?" So we didn't have an agreed upon global time until 1841, like less than 150 years ago. We didn't even have an agreed upon time. Like people would just use the sun, and that would, so like the a town, my island would have a different time to the island next to me because the sun would hit it at a slight, like there might be 10 or 15 minutes different. And it floored me because I thought, what do you mean?
Yeah.
The world didn't even agree upon a time. And yet now we are working with supercomputers. Like,
Yeah.
no wonder we're all feeling like things are changing fast because they
Yeah.
objectively are.
Yeah. Well, my granny's generation, so she was born what in 1917. Yeah, she's passed away now, but they didn't have airplanes, and then by the time she died, they'd landed on the moon. I mean, that's just crazy.
Yeah, exceptional, an extraordinary
Yeah.
time to be alive. And that comes with lots of challenges and also like downsides, but in fact, just an enormous amount of opportunity and change. If you can really lean into being adaptable, which is where like this like generalist skill set, I think is just so valuable.
Yeah, and I just shout out. You mentioned the reading about the history of time and stuff. I just a shout out to anyone sort of reading arts degrees at university. I feel like they've really been sort of trodden upon in the last 20, 30 years, and that's not a political statement. It's happening across the world, and it's a real shame because I think you can learn so much from history, from
Mm.
literature, learning another language. Crazy concept, but how about trying to understand other cultures? Hey. But no, let's just stop teaching people other languages because oh well you don't need to anymore. I completely disagree with that. But I get why it's happening. But yeah, keep fighting the arts, everyone out there.
Yeah, and I think for every trend, there is an anti-trend. So for every trend of like right now, there's a huge trend, right? Of like, short form, this like addiction to scrolling and social
Yes.
media and this addiction to being online. And but the anti-trend to that is long form. It's in-person meetups. It's like going to these curated dinners. It's arts degrees. It's reading. It's like there's
Yeah.
always going to be an anti-trend, and you can always find your people. While maybe even the
Yeah.
majority is in the trend, if you look hard enough and you name it and you explicitly say who and what you're looking for, there's always another group of people who are often in the anti.
Yeah.
So I was reading through our notes prepping for this call, and you wrote a line that I was like, oh, That's going to be the title of the podcast. That is absolutely a perfect title. And what you said was how to build a satisfying, sustainable career as a midlife generalist. And you've got a few things that I wanted to touch on. So, if this is you, if you are listening, if you are like, I would like to build a satisfying, sustainable career as a midlife generalist, close off any other distraction and zone in, listen here. This is going to be a fantastic part of the episode. The first part that I want to dig into is how to find your next role when recruiters don't know what to do with you. A very common challenge for folks. What's your advice?
Yeah, I'm still getting my head around this however many years on, but I'm feeling like I get it a bit more now. If I go back 10, 15 years, I had a real problem talking to headhunters because it was like I was speaking another language. And that you have a conversation with them, that the initial chat is almost always like 90% of it's exactly the same. Tell me a bit about yourself. What sectors have you worked in? Where are you based? What's your salary expectation? And then it's kind of a bit of kind of tumbleweed. And I, let's just step back. Let's just work out what's going on here. You as a potential candidate are a product to them, and I don't mean that. I'm not being nasty to them or me being nasty to anyone else out there. The customer paying headhunters or exec teams are the employer, and they are their customer, right? And there's a lot of disruption going on in that sector right now, because a lot of employers, and I've worked in these types of businesses, they've said, well, why are we paying 20% of someone's salary for this service? We could just do it ourselves. Let's hire someone, and they can just search LinkedIn and find people themselves. And that does happen, and it can be successful. What I'd say is that the good headhunters and exec search companies out there, the people there, they are very good at investing time in relationships with employers and boards of directors, and they're much more tuned in as to what's going on in the workplace and when employers might need some new talent and what kind of buzzwords, what are the key things that they're looking for. It's literally their day job, right? So they're going to know a lot more than I would as a generalist. So put yourselves in their position. Someone like me, or generalist, my LinkedIn looks like a bowl of spaghetti. And it's like it completely conflicts with their business model, where a lot of the time their clients are going, well, we're looking for a marketing director, preferably 5 years experience at some kind of equivalent. And what does the headhunters do? They then go, and I've got this from a few of them, and it may not be exactly everyone's methodology, but they then go on LinkedIn and they look at the competitors of that employer, and they go hunting for someone with a similar job role, or one that's kind of one junior who's next looking for the next step. That's exactly what I'd do. Again, I'm not having a pop. It's just what the process is. And I've sense checked this because as I do get approached occasionally by headhunters, but not as much as some of my colleagues who are more specialist, and that can be a bit of an ego kind of killer if you kind of, well, how come you're getting contacted by headhunters every week? I'm not. And it's not me, it's just my background's not guess what, I'm not an FD, so I'm not someone who's that easy to place. That's okay, just make peace with that. So I've kind of turned it around and thought, well, how can I help these guys? And I always ask them when they do approach me. I said, "Oh, can I ask, how did you find me?" And most of the time, it's because of one of the companies listed on my LinkedIn bio. So whilst there's some kind of negativity about having loads of different companies in your profile, I think one thing it does do, it means that when headhunters or exec teams are looking for people from competitors, they're more likely to come up with your profile. So my sense is it's better to have more than less on your LinkedIn. Other people might disagree, and I'm absolutely not an expert. I'm a generalist, but that's my sense on that. I'd also say that when they do think like an exec search guy or woman, then they've got a vacancy. They probably want to put 3, 4 candidates in front of an employer, rarely one, right? So pitch yourself as a bit of a wild card, but don't do it in a, I'm your random joker. Just say, look, I've got some experience on this, and it might be helpful for you to put someone like me in front of your client, just to sense check exactly what they're looking for and to
Mm.
challenge. They've said that this is definitely required. Okay, I don't have 5 years in the banknote printing industry. I've got 3, or I've got 1, and I understand it. I did a project on it, but that's not where my heart, it's not where I've spent my whole career. It doesn't mean I'm not a potential fit. And then back yourself in that interview. Just treat it as, your challenge is to get the interview, and then you've got to really shine at the interview, right?
Own it is what I'm hearing. And that's it. I think half the problem, the thing that is really depressing is when you have to try and squeeze into this box and pretend that you're someone that you're not. That is such golden advice. And it's not going to work in 100% of the situations. Like some recruiters will be like, you're owning it. I don't get it. And that's also okay.
Yes, and I again just thinking about sort of messages to people out there, perhaps sort of 5, 10 years younger than me or earlier on in their careers. I'd say don't look down too much. There must be a song title there. But anyway, don't look down too much. Just go with what you're doing, because actually the more senior you get, what I've found, the more senior you get, the more benefits of being a generalist in terms of your leadership
Mm,
skills, because you'll have a whole load of different experiences to bring to the table in a leadership role. So, yeah, if you can get through those difficult years in your 30s where you're not perhaps maxing your salary compared to your your contemporaries, but if you can get through that, then you should come out of it actually with quite an attractive proposition.
yeah, and this is backed up in Range by David Epstein, where he says, yeah, often like, someone earlier in their career, and that can, I think he uses the analogy of sports, but people who basically sample widely, then this time where they're not making as much as their peers and they're not as like progressing as fast as their peers, but then they almost like pop out the other side. And this is what I see in Generalist World all the time. Someone who comes to that kind of 7 to 10 years into their career, they're feeling a bit lost and disheartened, and but then they pop out the other side and they're actually a better fit for more senior or leadership roles.
Yeah, and I think that's where generalists. If I had more advice, even if it doesn't make sense at the time, going back to Steve Jobs, just say yes to stuff. It doesn't matter if it doesn't work out, it's fine. But my first proper commitment job after I did 2 years at an NGO, which I loved, working in kind of promoting Latin American stuff in London. It was like best job on paper in lots of ways. But then I got approached by an ex-army guy who, as I say, he knew loads about kidnap and ransom in Latin America, and he wanted a website because, probably like AI now, right? Everyone was, oh, we need a website. He wasn't quite sure why he needed a website, but given that I was in my 20s, surely I understood what a website was. So I went, yeah, okay, and quickly found out what a website was and how to build one. But you just go for it, without just be your authentic self, but at the same time embrace your generalist skills and back yourself to try stuff. And that led to I literally that led to me spending 3 years in Cape Town building a team from nothing, because I built this website and then said, well, I need a team to help me continue building out the content. And they said, well, that's quite expensive. Do you want to go and do it in South Africa? It's cheaper there. And I went, yeah, okay. Just say yes to stuff. It's brilliant.
You can't make it up. Like, there's no way you could ever predict that that is where those dots would lead. I love that quote about you couldn't only connect the dots looking backward. And if people are wanting an exercise to do later today, do it today. Like, have a look at where you are up until now and look backward, look at the dots, and you'll start to see a pattern of how they connected.
Yeah, Sheryl Sandberg in Lean In, she talks about the death of the career ladder. Not for everyone. It depends on who you are and what you want to do and stuff. Surgeons and stuff still need a career ladder, but it's more of a play gym. It's like go and play on the slide for a bit, and then doesn't mean that you have to do the slide before you do the rope. Just play with some stuff.
Yeah. Oh, lean in. I've just noted that down to read. Would you recommend?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean it's a bit anachronistic now. You know her background, right? So very impressive woman who's managed to work with Mark Zuckerberg for a few years. So got to learn something, right? But really, really good. I definitely recommend it.
Okay, fantastic. Noted. Jonathan, how do you think about leading experts without competing with experts?
So if I look back at the best teams I've been part of or led, it's definitely been a mix of generalists and specialists, right? I don't think there's much argument about that. You've probably seen teams full of specialists who struggle to work across the silos, where the engineering guy can't talk to the finance woman in the right language, and it's all kind of very internecine politics and stuff. And then you got teams full of generalists where, oh my God, lovely time and high fives and it's great, but can you actually get some stuff done? Because it's like we need to move on and actually get some content here. So yeah, it's getting that mix, right? And I think in terms, as I say, if you're a generalist, I think that the more senior roles actually it does play to your strengths as a generalist because you have to try and get the best out of the finance person and the engineer, and the marketing person, and try and be that translator across these different
Mm,
specialisms. So I
mm.
I would say this as a generalist and as a leader, but I think there's some real qualities in generalists to play that leadership role.
Yeah, for a while there, I wanted to like kind of pull my hair out with the generalist versus specialist debate because it's moot. Like the idea for me is that like there are generalists and there are specialists, and they both have immense value when we actually use them and when we actually
Yeah.
leverage them. And that's a perfect example of how you just explained. Yeah, when you've got all these specialists, they need someone to help. It's like the generalists make the specialists better and the specialists make the generalists better when we can
Yeah.
create these teams where both can kind of live up to their potential.
Yeah, I think with that comes there needs to be a high dose of humility and a recognition that
Mm,
you are, as a generalist, you are rarely, if ever, going to be the cleverest guy in the room. And I think some people struggle with that. I love it. When I've got boffins in the room, I love it. It's like, oh my God, I don't understand how you do that. And yeah, again, it's not just massaging their ego. It's like you have got some brains here that are really important because I'm not a threat to them. I'm a generalist. I don't want their job. I want you to be brilliant because that makes me look good as well. So it's like it's kind of win-win stuff.
yeah, I love that. And lastly, how do you stay energized when your path is well, you're basically on the squiggly meandering path rather than this very clear and yeah, you can predictable, I guess, kind of career ladder.
It's got to be "Don't Give Up" by Peter Gabriel and Kate Bush, Millie. I think a bit of cheesy 80s music definitely helps. No, all joking apart, I think it's that feeling that you're going to be in moments in your career which you don't enjoy, right? I'm sorry to burst anyone's bubble out there, but the lows make the highs a hell of a lot better. So I think keep going, but at the same time, at some point you got to call it. If you're in a funk, you've got to have an honest conversation with yourself and your team or your boss and work through it. But I think it's recognizing those points where, sheesh, I've got a lot to learn here, and I'm going through. Sometimes the best thing is just to keep going. Perhaps give yourself some benchmarks. So I'll keep going till Christmas. I'm going to see how I feel in the new
Hmm.
year. I'm just going to give it my best shot. But then, yeah, also start putting out feelers with your network. It's okay to fail. I think again this feeling that like businesses and people can't fail. I mean, I've definitely failed, and I've learned so much in those failures, and that makes you stronger, right? I mean, those first 10 years at this startup, I think I'd learned how not to run a business. To be honest, that's like, but that you take all that learning and then you can apply it. It's so much easier once you kind of recognize that. Yeah, I failed on that, and I'm not going to do that again.
Yeah, it's only a failure if you don't learn anything.
I 100% agree. Yeah, and if it's one of my favorite questions. It's one of those kind of not what are your weaknesses? Oh, well, actually, it's my strengths. It's like, yeah, give me something
Mm.
you failed on, and just be honest about it. What have you learned from it? And if don't give me someone who says they've never failed at anything. Either they're not telling you the truth, or they're due a failure.
Yeah, they're overdue one. This has been amazing. There is so many golden nuggets, as promised at the beginning of the episode. Jonathan, is there
Excellent.
anything that I haven't asked you that you're like, oh, I really wish Millie would have asked me that while we were live?
No, Millie, it's been really good. It's been good to have a chat. As I say, I think what Generous World is doing is brilliant. It's helping me with my language in terms of how I talk to people about me and my role. And I think there's thousands of people out there like me who are kind of just helping. Generous World helps make sense of that. So thank you.
Yay! Well, thank you so much for coming on, and I'll see you at the next London meetup.
Cheers, Millie.